People are leaving the UK. A lot of them just moved to the UK and realized that they made an absolutely big mistake, and now they have no option other than to leave the UK and go back home. Is that going to happen to you? Well, you can hope not, but how do you ensure you do not make the same mistakes that they did? Well, one way is by finding out what mistakes they made in the first place. So from the time I was in school, the UK was like a really hot destination to both study and work. And if you actually move to the UK or come and visit the UK, you'll realize that there are a lot of people here whose families moved here 2 or 3 generations ago. So the UK is quite honestly a melting pot of people from all over the world, which obviously means it's one of the best destinations in the world for most people to move and live in. But if you've been reading the news of late, you would have realized that there's a mass exodus of sorts that's happening, both in terms of immigrants and in terms of British nationals leaving the UK. And I think it's really important for you to try and understand what those reasons are and see how they will impact you, if they impact you at all, if you're considering moving to the UK. Now, before we understand why people are leaving the UK in the first place, let's talk about why they moved here. Now, this is irrespective of whether they've moved off late or whether they moved in the good old days. The biggest reason, obviously, is more money. A lot of people who moved to the UK came from countries which were either underdeveloped countries or less developed countries and were paying a lot less than the UK for the same roles. So obviously, people could make more money here, save more money in the UK. The second reason is a lot of people wanted a better way of life. So either they came from countries where you couldn't freely express yourselves, or you couldn't live as freely as you wanted to. And the UK was very open in terms of how you wanted to live. So it was a great option for people looking for a different way of life, a better way of life, or just access clean water and air. And the third reason is a lot of those people also wanted a better life for their children, so they moved here. And now let's cut to today. The primary reason why people move to the UK to make more money might not hold good today anymore in the UK. With rising costs and inflation in the UK, actually making money and saving in the UK has become an absolute challenge for a lot of people today. A lot of jobs will still offer you a lot more money in the UK versus whichever other countries you're looking at, especially if you belong to India like I did. But the question is it enough? Now, here's the thing. Assume you make 20 lakhs in India, and for the same job, you're offered about 50,000 pounds a year, which is the equivalent to 50 lakhs. At first sight, you might be tempted to think that that's a brilliant offer, but here's the thing. If you boil it down to how much you'll be spending here versus how much you'd be spending at home in India, you will be earning a lot less because you'll be saving a lot less. So effectively, you're not making more money or making less money. Now, if you work in tech, it's even more challenging because with the onset of really large tech companies and global tech companies moving to India, you might effectively get paid the same salary in the UK and in India. So that effectively means you make a lot more money and save a lot more money in India because the cost of living is a lot lower. And this might be true even if you don't belong to India. It might be true for whichever country you live in. And the really unfortunate thing is that the salaries in the UK are not really on par with the rising costs and the inflations, to such an extent that a lot of essential services in the UK have actually started going on strike. In the past 2 months, we've had strikes for rail. Like if you've seen my Instagram stories, we got stuck because there was a rail strike. There's been a doctor strike, a nurse's strike, a post services strike. There has actually been an ambulance strike. There has even been a strike calendar because of the amount of strikes going on in the UK. It's just so that you can keep updated on where there's a strike and how it's going to affect you. Now, another really big reason why people are leaving the UK is because of the rising costs and inflations, which is all obviously making it a lot more expensive to buy a house in the UK. Not to mention the fact that the housing market in the UK is right now all over the place. But the fact is that if you are looking at buying a house, you'll probably be looking at getting a mortgage for the next 30 years because it's so expensive to buy houses in the UK. Now, obviously, like with all places, there are more expensive places and less expensive places to stay in. But if you take Bangalore, for instance, because that's where we used to live, in most decent areas, you can get an apartment for 1 or 2 crores. But if you look at Maidenhead, which is not even a city, it's a town, it would cost you about £575,000 to buy a 2 BHK in Maidenhead, and pretty similar numbers for Reading, which is actually a city. And if you want to buy a 3 BHK detached house in Reading, you're looking at £675,000, which is approximately 6.7, 6.8 crores. That's a lot. So, to be honest, buying a house in the UK right now is a luxury and not even something most people can afford. And if you do decide to buy a house, then you have to choose between, well, paying off the mortgage or those small little luxuries in life. Now, if you're considering London, obviously the costs are a lot higher because, well, London is London. But if you compare it against Canada, the costs of living or buying a house in Canada are a lot less than buying a house in the UK. So if Canada is another place you have been considering, this is something I would request you to keep in mind. Living or buying a house in Canada is a lot cheaper than buying in the UK. Now, another reason why a lot of people are leaving the UK is because a lot of them came to the UK on student visas and then proceeded to get their PSW. So they were in the UK for about 2-3 years, 4 years. And after that, they were either unable to convert their visas into work visas, or they got temporary work visas like carer jobs, which expired really quickly. So they had to leave the country because of that. And that is the sad truth about studying in the UK, because every year hundreds of thousands of students move to the UK in the hope that they will get a job in the UK or increase their chances of getting a job. And every year thousands of people go back because they couldn't convert those jobs. The bitter truth is not everyone will get sponsored in the UK. Now, in order to increase your chances at getting a job in the UK, you obviously need to have picked the right college, the right course, and networked for the entire duration of your course to try and convert it. But even then, a lot of people struggle. And the worst part is, even after you get a job, a lot of people are then left with hundreds of thousands of pounds in terms of debt. And when you get a job over here in the UK, which isn't paying as much as you expected it to, you're then left barely managing to pay all of your expenses in the UK and huge debt, like a mountain of debt, to also pay off. Now, because of this, a lot of people tend to get a little desperate. So what they do is they either stop their course midway or they get the first job that they get, whether it's related to the course that they're doing or not, and then they stop their education. And the problem is, a few months later or a year later, they realize that they hate the job that they're doing. They're stuck because now they have no other alternate, because they didn't complete their course, so they can't get another job, or they actually realize that their visa is running out because it was a short-term visa and they have no way out. Now, one way to avoid this is to understand how the system works in the first place. If you jump the gun too early, you lose out. If you wait too long, you lose out, and you won't end up getting a job that offers sponsorship. Now, if you need help with this, I suggest you sign up for my course, which tells you how you can land a job in the UK. It gives you access to hundreds of job portals and job sites and agencies. It gives you help on how to build that perfect resume to stand out amongst recruiters, and it tells you what exactly you need to do to get that job, which gives you visa sponsorship. Now, if this is something that interests you, I will leave a link in the description below. Sign up for the course, let it help you. And while I've got you, if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now's the time to do it. Hit the subscribe button now. Another really big reason why people are leaving the UK is because of the collapsing healthcare system. Right now, the healthcare system in the UK is on the verge of collapse so bad. It was even better during COVID times, but it's so bad right now that if you go to a hospital that is struggling, you'll probably find patients lying down in the corridors. There are news articles which say that they have converted closets to make them ER examination rooms. Wow. And the wait for a regular GP appointment or visit to your physician will take you 1 to 2 weeks. Now, most regular GPs operate between Monday and Friday and between 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. So if you do tend to get sick after that, or if you meet with an accident, you're going to face a bit of a challenge, because then you have to go to the A&E. And at the A&E, you will be waiting for about 6 to 8 hours just to get seen by a doctor. If you live in Maidenhead like we do, there's no A&E, which means that if there's an emergency during the weekend or after 5 or 6 in the evening, you need to drive to the next town to get seen and then again wait 6 to 8 hours. And the worst part in all of this is the doctors and the nurses in the UK and all the other healthcare professionals are being worked to the bone because of these conditions. And at the same time, their requests for a higher pay is not being met. Their requests for better working conditions are not being met. Now, you might be tempted to think that because this is public healthcare, why don't you just go for a private healthcare option and you go to a private hospital? Because here's the thing. Unless your company sponsors private health insurance, it's extremely expensive to use private healthcare over here, because even a regular appointment with a GP at a private hospital is going to cost you 200 or 250 pounds for a consultation. So for people who get unwell or people who have young children that they're worried about, the UK really doesn't make sense, especially in terms of the healthcare system that's failing right now, so you get why people might want to leave. Another reason why people are leaving the UK is the weather. Like, everyone knows that the UK is usually always cold and raining, and a lot of people know that while moving here, but after they get here they realize how gloomy it can get, or cloudy, like I say, not gloomy. But the absolute lack of seeing direct bright sunlight for days just messes with a lot of people's minds. I had a person who wrote into me from Dubai, and we all know Dubai is sunny. And she was so taken aback by the fact that she had not seen the sun out in days that it was starting to depress her. So a lot of people actually start forming depression because of this. And a lot of people cannot cope with the weather and leave. Not me though. I love the weather here. I love not having direct sunlight. If you're like me, you don't have much to worry about. So here's the thing. If you are in the process of moving to the UK, this is what I would suggest. You need to start asking yourself the following questions. Are you moving to the UK to make more money? If you are, you need to sit down and do the math before you do anything else. You need to sit down and see how much you're going to make in the UK, what your expenses are going to be in the UK, and then effectively how much you can save. You need to compare it with how much you are already saving right now, or if you're evaluating another country, compare it with how much you can save in the other country, and then decide if the UK financially makes sense for you. The next point is, if you are planning on moving to the UK for a better life for your children, again, it boils down to how much you can make, because apart from, well, great, clean, fresh air and good water, for everything else in the UK, you need to pay money. You want to put them in swimming classes, you have to pay money. They have to go for football classes, dancing classes. All of that costs money. So, does your salary allow you to, well, build a better life for your family in the UK versus any other country? But on the other hand, if you just want to experience the UK for a few years, then absolutely dive right in, because if it doesn't work out for you, you can just pack your bags and leave in a few years. If it does work out for you, well, great. Now, here's the thing. If you need to calculate how much you're going to be saving, you need to know how much you're going to be spending in the UK. And if you don't know how to calculate those numbers, or if you need to get a better idea on how much you will spend in the UK on a monthly basis, I very strongly suggest you watch this.